All right, something's happening. I just spaced out. I started the video and I was like, what am I actually doing? This is the second video of me reading the 10th part of The Color of Magic. That was a weird sensation. I think not, said Liesa. Harun took the wine cup slowly. He grinned like a pumpkin. Around the arena, the dragons started to bay. Their riders looked up, and something like a green blur flashed across the arena, and Harun had gone. The wine cup hung momentarily in the air, then crashed down on the steps. Only then did a single drop spill. This was because, in the instant of unfolding Harun gently in his claws, Nine Reeds the dragon had momentarily synchronized their bodily rhythms. Since the dimension of the imagination is much more complex than those of time and space, which are very junior dimensions indeed, the effect of this was to instantly transform a stationary and priapic Harun into a Harun moving sideways at 80 miles an hour with no ill effects whatsoever except for a few wasted mouthfuls of wine. Another effect was to cause Liesa to scream with rage and summon her dragon. As the gold beast materialized in front of her, she leapt astride it, still naked, and snatched a crossbow from one of the guards. Then she was airborne while the other dragon riders swarmed toward their own beasts. The lore master, watching from the pillar he had prudently slid behind in the mad scramble, happened at that moment to catch the cross-dimensional echoes of a theory being at the same instant hatched in the mind of an early psychiatrist in an adjacent universe, possibly because the dimension link was flowing both ways, and for a moment the psychiatrist saw the girl and the dragon. The lore master smiled. What? Want to bet that she won't catch him? Said Gretcha in a voice of worms and sepulchres right by his ear. The lore master shut his eyes and swallowed hard. I thought that my lord would now be residing fully in the dreamland. In the dreadland, he managed. I am a wizard, said Gretcha. Death himself must claim a wizard. And aha! He doesn't appear to be in the neighborhood. Shall we go? Asked Death. He was on a white horse, a horse of flesh and blood, but red of eye and fiery of nostril, and he stretched out a bony hand and took Gretcha's soul out of the air, and rolled it up until it was a point of painful light, and then he swallowed it. Then he clapped spurs to his steed, and it sprang into the air, sparks coruscating from its hooves. Lord Gretcha, whispered the old lore master as the universe flickered around him. That was a mean trick, came the wizard's voice, a mere speck of sound disappearing into the infinite black dimensions. My lord, what is death like? Called the old man tremulously. When I have investigated it fully, I will let you know, came the faintest of modulations on the breeze. Yes, murmured the lore master. A thought struck him. During daylight, please, he added. I love how Death just shows up. You clowns! Screamed Harun from his perch on Nine Reed's foreclaws. What did he say? Roared Rincewind as the dragon ripped its way through the air in the race for the heights. Didn't hear, bellowed Two Flower, his voice torn away by the gale. As the dragon banked slightly, he looked down at the little toy spinning top that was the mighty Wormberg, and saw the swarm of creatures rising in pursuit. Nine Reed's wings pounded and flicked the air away contemptuously. Thinner air, too. Two Flower's ear popped. For the third time, ahead of the swarm, he noticed, was a golden dragon. Someone on it, too. Hey, are you all right? Said Rincewind urgently. He had to drink in several lungfuls of the strangely distilled air in order to get the words out. I could have been a lord, and you clowns had to go and Harun gasped as the chill, thin air drew the life even out of his mighty chest. What's happening to the air? Muttered Rincewind. Blue lights appeared in front of his eyes. Unk, said Two Flower, and oh God, and passed out. The dragon vanished. Oh my God! For a few seconds, the three men continued upward, Two Flower and the wizard presenting an odd picture as they sat one in front of the other, with their legs astride something that wasn't there. Then what passed for gravity on the disc recovered from the surprise and claimed them. At that moment, Liesa's dragon flashed by and Harun landed heavily across its neck. Liesa leaned over and kissed him. This detail was lost to Rincewind as he dropped away, with his arms still clasped around Two Flower's waist. The disc was a little round map pinned against the sky. It didn't appear to be moving, but Rincewind knew that it was. The whole world was coming toward him like a giant custard pie. Oh my God, it's his worst fears coming true. Wake up, he shouted above the roar of the wind. Dragons, think of dragons. There was a flurry of wings as they plummeted through through the host of pursuing creatures, which fell away and up. Dragons screamed and wheeled across the sky. No answer came from Two Flower. Rincewind's robe whipped around him, but he did not wake. Dragons, thought Rincewind in a panic. He tried to concentrate his mind, tried to envisage a really lifelike dragon. If he can do it, he thought, then so can I. But nothing happened. The disc was bigger now, a cloud-swirled circle rising gently underneath them. Rincewind tried again, screwing up his eyes and straining every nerve in his body. A dragon. His imagination, as someone battered an overused organ, reached out for a dragon, any dragon. "It won't work," laughed a voice like the dull toning of a funeral bell. "You don't believe in them." Rincewind looked at the terrible mounted apparition grinning at him, and his mind bolted in terror. Is that death? There was a brilliant flash. There was utter darkness. There was a soft floor under Rincewind's feet, a pink light around him, and the sudden shocked cries of many people. He looked around wildly. He was standing in some kind of tunnel, which was mostly filled with seats in which outlandishly dressed people had been strapped. They were all shouting at him. "Wake up," he hissed. "Help me." Dragging the still unconscious tourist with him, he backed away from the mob until his free hand found an oddly shaped door handle. He twisted it and ducked through, then slammed it hard. He stared around the new room in which he found himself and met the terrified gaze of a young woman who dropped the tray she was holding and screamed. "What the fuck is going on?" It sounded like the sort of scream that brings muscular help. Rincewind, awash with fear-distilled adrenaline, turned and barged past her. There were more seats here, and the people in them ducked as he dragged Two-Flower urgently along the central gangway. Beyond the rows of seats were little windows. Beyond the windows, against a background of fleecy clouds, was a dragon's wing. It was silver. How? He's on an airplane, right? I hate all of you. Okay. "I've been eaten by a dragon," he thought. "That's ridiculous," he replied. "You can't see out of dragons." Then his shoulder hit the door at the far end of the tunnel, and he followed it through into a cone-shaped room that was even stranger than the tunnel. It was full of tiny glittering lights. Among the lights and contoured chairs were 4 men who were now staring at him open-mouthed. As he stared back, he saw their gazes dart sideways. Rincewind turned slowly. Beside him a 5th man, youngish, bearded, as swarthy as the nomad folk of the Great Neff. "Where am I?" said the wizard. "In the belly of a dragon?" The young man crouched back and shoved a small black box in the wizard's face. The men in the chairs ducked down. "What is it?" said Rincewind. "A picture box?" He reached out and took it, a movement which appeared to surprise the swarthy man, who shouted and tried to snatch it back. There was another shout, this time from one of the men in the chairs, only now he wasn't sitting. He was standing up, pointing something small and metallic at the young man. It had an amazing effect. The man crouched back with his hands in the air. "Please give me the bomb, sir," said the man with the metallic thing. "Carefully, please." "This thing?" said Rincewind. "You have it. I don't want it." The man took it very carefully and put it on the floor. The seated men relaxed, and one of them started speaking urgently to the wall. The wizard watched him in amazement. "Don't move," snapped the man with the metal. "An amulet," Rincewind decided. "It must be an amulet." The swarthy man backed into the corner. "That was a very brave thing you did," said amulet holder to Rincewind. "You know that?" "What? What's the matter with your friend?" "Friend?" Rincewind looked down at Two-Flower, who was still slumbering peacefully. That was no surprise. What was really surprising was that Two-Flower was wearing new clothes. Strange clothes. His breeches now ended just above his knees. Above that he wore some sort of vest of brightly striped material. On his head was a ridiculous little straw hat with a feather in it. What the fuck is going on? An awkward feeling around the leg regions made Rincewind look down. His clothes had changed too. Instead of the comfortable old robe so marvelously well adapted for speed and action in all possible contingencies, his legs were encased in cloth tubes. He was wearing a jacket of the same gray material. Until now he'd never heard the language the man with the amulet was using. It was uncouth and vaguely hublandish, so why could he understand every word? Let's see, what the fuck is going on? They'd suddenly appeared in this dragon after they'd materialized in this they had struck up a conversation in the airport so naturally that they had chosen to sit together on the plane, and he promised to show Jack Zweiblumen around when they got back to the States. Yes, that was it. And then Jack had been taken ill, and he'd panic and come through here and surprise this hijacker. Of course. What on earth was hublandish? What the fuck is going on? Dr. Rincewind rubbed his forehead. What he could do with the drink. What the fuck just happened? I hate all of you. Ripples of paradox spread out across the sea of casualty. Perhaps the most important point that would have to be borne in mind by anyone outside the sum totality of the multiverse was that, although the wizard and the tourist had indeed only recently appeared in an aircraft in midair, they had also, at one and the same time, been riding on that airplane in the normal course of things. That is to say, while it was true that they had just appeared in this particular set of dimensions, it was also true that they had been living in them all along. It is at this point that normal language gives up and goes and has a drink. I do get that, though. Sort of. So their consciousness, they merged with their version of themselves in a parallel universe. I guess. The point is that several quintillion atoms had just materialized, however they had not, see below, in a universe where they should not strictly had been. The usual upshot of this sort of thing is a vast explosion, but since universes are fairly resilient things, this particular universe had saved itself by instantaneously unraveling its space-time continuum back to a point where the surplus atoms could be safely accommodated and then rapidly rewinding back to that circle of firelight, which, for want of a better term, its inhabitants were wont to call the present. This had, of course, changed history. There had been a few less wars, a few extra dinosaurs, and so on, but on the whole, the episode passed remarkably quietly. Outside of this particular universe, however, the repercussions of the sudden double take bounced to and fro across the sum of things, bending whole dimensions and sinking galaxies without a trace. All this was, however, totally lost on Dr. Rincewind, 33, a bachelor, born in Sweden, raised in New Jersey, and a specialist in the breakaway oxidation phenomena of certain nuclear reactors. Anyway, he probably would not have believed any of it. Zweibleman had still seemed to be unconscious. The stewardess who had helped Rincewind to his seat, to the applause of the rest of the passengers, was bending him over anxiously. "We've radioed ahead," she told Rincewind. "There'll be an ambulance waiting when we land. It says on the passenger list that you're a doctor." "I don't know what's wrong with him," said Rincewind hurriedly. "It might be a different matter if he was a Magnox reactor, of course." "Is it shock of some kind?" "I've never—" His sentence terminated in a tremendous crash from the rear of the plane. Several passengers screamed. A sudden gale of air swept every loose magazine and newspaper into a screaming whirlwind that twisted madly down the aisle. Something else was coming up the aisle. Something big and oblong and wooden and brass-bound. "Oh my God! What the fuck have you made me read?" It had hundreds of legs. If it was what it seemed, a walking chest of the kind that had appeared in pirate stories, brimful of ill-gotten gold and jewels, then what would have been its lids suddenly gaped open. There were no jewels. There were lots of big square teeth, white as sycamore, and a pulsating tongue, red as mahogany. An ancient suitcase was coming to eat him. Rincewind clutched at the unconscious Zweibleman for what little comfort there was there, and glibbered, I fucking just got Zweibleman. My head hurts. That's Two-Flower in German, isn't it? He wished fervently that he was somewhere else. There was a sudden darkness. There was a brilliant flash. The sudden departure of several quintillion atoms from a universe that they had no right to be in anyway caused a wild imbalance in the harmony of the sum totality which it tried frantically to retrieve, wiping out a number of sub-realities in the process. Huge surges of raw magic boiled uncontrolled around the very foundations of the multiverse itself, welling up through every crevice into hitherto peaceful dimensions and causing novas, supernovas, stellar collisions, wild flights of geese, and drowning out imaginary continents. Worlds as far away as the other end of time experienced brilliant sunsets of coruscating octarine. His highly charged magical particles roared through the atmosphere. In the cometary halo around the fabled ice system of Zaret, a noble comet died as a prince flamed across the sky. All of this was, however, lost on Rincewind as, clutching the inert Two-Flower around the waist, he plunged toward the disc several hundred feet below. Not even the convulsions of all the dimensions could break the iron law of the conservation of energy, and Rincewind's brief journey in the plane had sufficed to carry him several hundred miles horizontally and 7,000 feet vertically. The word plane flamed and died in Rincewind's mind. Was that a ship down there? The cold waters of the Circle Sea roared up at him and sucked him down into their green, suffocating embrace. A moment later, there was another splash as the luggage, still bearing a label carrying the powerful traveling rune TWA, also hit the sea. Later on, they used it as a raft. I'm done with all of you forever.